Hello, this is Yuchen. I'm going to start my assignment 2 reports. So for the first questions, the research in the simulation design process involves three different stages. The first is describing the original system, second is identify the observable elements, and third is gathering data. So first of all, we have to do research on the original system to find out all the definable and undefinable knowns and unknowns. So if the original system is complex and I have no real way guaranteeing that some aspect I did not know, so which is important to the outcomes. There's a misunderstanding at these levels. So the most influential on the results of simulations. So once we get a better understanding of the original systems, we need to identify some observable elements which are related to the goals of our simulations. So we don't want over-define the observable elements which are waste of time and resource to collect sufficient data to describe these things. Then we have to collect data like statistical information for our observable elements in order to create valid simulations and verify the correctness of the simulations results. And on the other hand, the research in the video game and the serious game design process happens after we have chosen our own objective and premises. The promise here refers to the stance or story of the game. Then we need to do some research on the premise in order to obtain sufficient content knowledge to work with it. Like by looking for games and simulations with same objective or premises and note what we like and what we don't like about them. We need to find out what they are and how they work and what the surrounding issues are in order to design a good game. And for the second question, I first start with the similarity. So first, both research process happens after we have a clear goal or objective of what we will design. And second, both research process aim to finding out some like how the system works from observation on some similar systems or games. For simulation, we need to take care of the original systems. And for the game design, we need to go deeper on the premises we have defined earlier in order to know how it works. But for the differences, in the research of the simulation design process, it's very hard and impossible to include everything that has some influence because we don't actually know what they are. Like doing the research, we have to choose some observable elements which are related to our goal of the simulations. The data may not be always available for us for the simulations. So it's important to identify the types of data which we have access or which we can gather, since the data will determine what kind of questions we are able to explore and what kind of experiments we can conduct using the simulations. But in the video game and serious game design process, our research should be focusing on the story of the game. So during the research, we need to record specific implementation ideas about what we decide to have or like to have in the premise. All rules in the premises can be either gathered from other games or simulations or can be created by ourselves. And for the third questions, the testing has three parts: verification, validation, and refinement. So verification determines like how closely a simulation implements the selected model, and the validation determines how closely the model represents the reality of the systems. And since there will always be some inherent inaccuracies, such as the incomplete understanding of the original systems, we cannot guarantee that the result we get from simulation is always what we want. Therefore, we need to perform some testing at each step of the process to correct and adjust our models, which means refining our simulation process. So in the process of testing video games and serious game, we need to detect in some uncovered flows in the games and post-mortem for future iterations. The playing testing phase in the game design process involves having people play the game and provide feedback on everything from the interface and the game mechanism to the dialogue and the overall appearance. Ideally, only minor mistakes or misconceptions should be found in this phase. It should begin as early as possible so we can have feedback to polish and refine the game at the early stage. And on the other hand, the post-mortem is a written account of the critical expansion of a game after it's been built in order to learn from it. And this is critical for making sure that each iteration or implementation is better than the previous. So for the last questions, First, they are both used for verification and validations. So in either simulation or game design process, it is important for us to verify whether the output is what we expect. So for example, in simulations, we expect the result to match our observations. In game, we expect the character move as what we want. And both of them can be used for refinement of the simulations or the game in an iterative way. So um, okay, but for the difference, the way to conduct testing in the simulation, when performing testing against the simulation, generally we compare the result from simulation with our observations, and there is no use for user to be involved in. But in testing the game design process, we need feedback from different users, so there's certain levels user involved. Also, the purpose of testing the game is to verify in the is that whether the game is fun, whether it's motivating, whether it's educational. So it's for the game design process. For testing the game design process, there is an additional step need to take, which is the black boxes. So we don't get into the internal part of the game. If it's testing for a serious game, then we also have to test either like the pedagogic logic will be learned.